Hello, and welcome to today's Member Benefit webinar. My name is Jessica Bailey-Wheaton, and I'm Vice President and General Counsel at Health Capital Consultants, a healthcare, financial, and economic consulting firm based in St. Louis, Missouri. This year, I serve as Chair of the YLD Health Law Committee and as YLD Liaison to the Health Law Section's Membership Committee. Today, I will be moderating the panel on charting your health law career path, which is being jointly hosted by the YLD Health Law Committee, the Health Law Section's Membership Committee, and the ABA Law Student Division. Especially in the midst of such an unprecedented time, I know that law students and young lawyers alike are understandably concerned about the pandemic's effects on the start and on the early stages of their health law careers. So during today's webinar, I will be asking our panelists questions about their own health law career paths and their tips, tricks, and advice for others. With us today, we have John Carreras, who serves as System Corporate Counsel of the legal team at CommonSpirit Health and is based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. This bar year, John serves as Vice Chair of the YLD Health Law Committee. We also have Ramana Rameswaran, an associate with Katten, Muchin, Rosenman in Washington, D.C. And this bar year, Ramana serves as co-chair of the Distance Learning Committee for the ABA Health Law Section. Thank you both so much for being with us today. We have a lot to discuss, so let's go ahead and dive into it. So with any good story, let's start at the beginning. Ramana, I'm going to ask you first and then go to John, but talk to us about how you got into health law and specifically the position that you're in today.
Sure. So how I got into health law is a little bit by accident, a little bit by design. I was a medical student before I decided to go to law school. So I clearly gravitated towards healthcare and the idea of healthcare. But frankly, I thought I would be a med mal attorney until I got to law school and realized, no, I don't want to be a med mal attorney. I want to do something different. So I switched my focus into learning more about other fields. And so healthcare always appealed to me, and specifically the transactional and regulatory aspect. So I'm now a transactional and regulatory healthcare attorney at Katten. So how I got into the position, just overall, when I was in law school, I was trying to find a job, just like I'm sure many of you are as well. And it was a tough market. So what I was doing was trying to figure out who to talk to, where to go. And what I did was I reached out to my law school's related healthcare entity at that time, it's Temple University Health System, and reached out to their general counsel, mostly to learn about what compliance work is all about, healthcare compliance and healthcare activities. When I spoke to the GC, she realized maybe this guy really wants to do something different, and point blank asked me, "Are you interested in something else?" And I said, "I'm really interested in the regulatory and transactions, but there's no job opportunities. Where can I go?" She created a position called a fellowship, and I joined Temple University Health System about a year later as a fellow. This is a position where for 1 to 2 years, you have an opportunity to learn everything you can about healthcare from a health system standpoint. And there are some all over the nation. So it's something to look out for. From there, I learned all of the aspects of how health system regulatory work works, moved on to another AmLaw 100 firm that was local to the Philadelphia region where I'm originally from, then moved to another AmLaw 200 firm here in DC, and now I'm here at Katten. So that's my path and how I got into healthcare.
That's great. John, what about you?
So thanks for the introduction, by the way. So my path was similar in a way. It was, as Ramana's, a little bit by accident. I had no idea in law school that I wanted to work in healthcare law. I did, in high school growing up, I always knew I either wanted to go to med school or become an attorney. So there was always this interest in medicine. But like Ramana described, when I graduated from law school back in 2011, it was right after the recession. Law firms were shedding jobs instead of growing. It was a very difficult time for a lot of young attorney graduates to find jobs in the areas they wanted. So I kind of took the approach of, I will go with whoever will hire me. And luckily, I was casting a wide net, going to a lot of networking events, letting people know that what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do, And lucky for me, our career development office became aware of an opening with the University of Colorado, Denver in their clinical research department as a contracts attorney. So he passed along a few resumes, one of which was mine, and it ended up working out that that was kind of my foot in the door in the healthcare profession. And it was a very narrow practice area, which is clinical research, which I loved, and to this day I love. But the idea for me was to transition more to general healthcare, which isn't always necessarily easy. And so the way that I did that, and I think we'll talk more about this later on in the webinar today, is I think it's important to make your network know, make them aware of where you want to end up, because to this day, every job that I've had as an attorney has been a warm lead, so to speak. Somebody who is aware of your interests and your drive and your desire to grow. And so from there, I ended up getting recruited by Catholic Health Initiatives, which is the former company that I'm with right now before the merger. And it was kind of an interesting career move for me because it was within the clinical research department as a contracts manager. So I wasn't actually practicing law per se, but I was doing a lot of the legal work that we do day to day, contract review, negotiation. And the goal there was to get my foot in the door of a big, company that has a very vast legal department, and ideally move up into that legal department in a few years. Well, making that goal known to a lot of others, lawyers on the legal team, that ended up happening about a year and a half after I started in that contracts manager role. So started off as an attorney just doing clinical research, and then again, making it known to the GC and other attorneys, I want to do healthcare operations. That's my end goal. And again, that happened about a year and a half after that. And I can't see myself doing anything else. I would like to practice healthcare law the rest of my career. I love it. But it's so part by design, partly by accident. I think it's important to be flexible and open-minded, but then also have the willingness to put in some work.
Yeah, absolutely. Like they say, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And that sounds like that was true for both of you all. And I think those are some great tips, John, in how to not just find that first position, but maybe it's not your ideal position, and how to get into that coveted role. Ramana, do you have anything to add to that? Any tips that you can think of for finding that first job?
Yeah, John kind of explained the idea of going into a role that you may start off with, but then transitioning to a different role. I'll tell you, I had not the greatest grades as a 1L when I was in law school. So it became really difficult to find that first position at large law firms or any law firms at that point. So it was about pivoting yourself and finding what translates well into the type of position that you want in the future. So getting experience anywhere, for example, as I mentioned before, compliance, that's a great field that's out there that a lot of people are in. And I have colleagues at the firms I've worked at, and as well as the in-house roles that I was in, where people were involved in compliance at first and switched or made a transition into the legal market itself specifically. So it's about going out there, finding positions that you can easily take something out of and use it to translate into the field that you want to be in.
Yeah, that's also a great point. So transitioning from, you get that first job. I want to hear from both of you, especially because Ramana, you're outside counsel at a law firm, and John, you're in-house counsel. What a typical day in the life is, if there is any such thing in the law. John, let's start with you. Walk us through a typical day.
So yeah, this question made me laugh at first. You kind of touched on it. No day seems to be typical. There's a wide variety of how days can go. There it could be. So ideally, you don't have a full day of meetings, and you have time to kind of tackle the projects that you have. And I think we'll talk more about this later, some skill sets. But I think prioritizing your workload is probably something we all have to do. You don't always have someone helping you along and saying, okay, this is more important and needs to get done faster than, something else. So that would be, every day I think I start off with kind of creating a task list of, okay, what are the most important burning projects that I need to get out the door today? And some of them may require more work than others. Personally, I like to tackle the bigger projects first, get it out of the way first thing in the morning. I have some colleagues, they're more productive in the afternoons. So they'll get the easy things that, the things that don't take as much time done at first, and then tackle the big things after lunch. Whatever it is, I have found it very helpful over the years to create a game plan for the day, kind of right off the bat, looking at your calls for the day and squeezing in times where you don't have meetings that you can get things done. But I would say almost every morning I wake up to at least a few urgent emails or text messages where healthcare executives or department leads need guidance on something right away. It could be patient care issue with, reviewing some sort of advanced care directive that may not be drafted or signed properly, or law enforcement showing up with a request or a demand for something that's unusual, whether to comply with it. It could be, an auditor or someone from CMS that's stopping by unannounced. It kind of runs the gamut. Those are the exciting things. 60% are maybe more mundane in a sense that they're related to contracts, employment agreements, or policy reviews, and emails. I mean, it's 2021. I think at this point everyone can relate to getting a very large volume of emails, and doing that, managing that can be a full-time job in and of its own. Not to mention throwing in the calls and the contract. So it can be a little overwhelming at first when you're in your first couple years in this practice area, probably like many other legal practice areas. But I think everyone kind of has to develop their own style and what works best for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right to play to your strengths, right? Whenever you feel most energized, do the big work or the hard work then. Ramana, how does that contrast with your day to day? If it does, or is a lot of your day putting out fires as well?
So it again, I think you touched on the fact that any day can be different, and it really just depends on the day. I think just giving a comparison, I would say my time when I was in-house was more like drinking out of a fire hose in terms of the knowledge base and the type of things that you're doing could be so wide range that you could be doing, a real estate issue in the morning, you could be dealing with a patient specific issue in the afternoon, and then in between be doing contracts. Whereas in the outside counsel environment, what I've found is we can really focus in a little bit more on specific topic areas that we're true masters of that area. For example, I mean, for healthcare attorneys in the regulatory space, we can look at Stark and AKS issues. And when we have a real estate question or when we have a litigation type question, we can pawn that to one of our friends within the firm or elsewhere to have that focused capability of doing that type of law. So we have the ability to focus on our area a little bit more than I did when I was in-house, I would say. One of the other pieces, though, is we do get fires almost every day. So there's a difference almost to me, and John, feel free to disagree with me. When I was in-house, at least, we had multiple clients, meaning your internal people that you work with, but you knew your internal business structure. You knew what people are looking for because you've worked with them a lot. In an outside counsel perspective, you're working with a multitude of groups of clients. It's not just one type of client, meaning a health system with a medical practice or something else. It could come from schools asking random questions that are related to healthcare, or it could come from movie studios or anything else that you can imagine that might have a specific healthcare question that you're capable of understanding or working on, or a pharmaceutical company, or a different type of provider than you're usually used to working with. So it requires you to get focused and get deeper on certain issues, but you are able to you're able to at least just focus on the healthcare aspect of that and go to other resources when you need to get the differences out there. But from a day-to-day perspective, it's the same idea though. I mean, you have calls during the day at different points that you try to weave in the work that you have, whether it's writing a memo, whether it's looking at a contract, or whether it's talking to other folks internally to brainstorm about different ideas. You fit it in where you can in between the calls and the meetings that you're also going to. Unlike John, I'm actually more of a afternoon person. So I usually in the morning take those quick tasks and just get them done because I know I can get them out the door, and it makes me feel like I'm progressing during my day really quickly and checking off that list that I've created at night. And then in the afternoon, really getting deeper into something so that I can focus. One of the things that I've tried to do, but as a junior associate or a mid-level associate, you don't really get a chance to do, is try to position your calls in a way so that you have either ample time in between to do something, or you plug them together so that then you have blocks of time. Because I'm one of those people that needs extra time to write something, because I need to spend the time to write it. If I get interrupted, I'll lose my train of thought, those kind of things. So you try to focus on how to do that, but that's true of any environment, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think those are all great points and little tips that you don't think about necessarily on the day-to-day, but they're extremely helpful, I've found, because I'm kind of the same way. So kind of staying along that train of thought, John, what are some skill sets that you think young lawyers can market to potential employers or even their health law clients?
Yeah, so some of these I think have already been mentioned. I would say the ability to prioritize your workload and kind of triage what's needs to get done today versus next week. So that's more from the professional side. I would say this may come as a surprise to law students or young lawyers, but I think maybe the biggest value could be navigating and managing your relationships with your clients and the business leads and executives that you're working with. There are so many different personalities and work styles. Different people like to interact in a professional manner in different ways. So realizing those differences and catering to them to the extent you're able, knowing the right questions to ask with certain individuals, as lawyers, we like a lot of information many times from our clients, and not all of the same individuals are as forthcoming. So knowing the types of questions to ask and when to ask them, how to ask them, so that you're not coming off in a way that may make the client defensive or feeling some sort of negative way, and not giving you the full picture. I think another one is, as a lawyer, a lot of times we get pulled, as in-house counsel especially, you get pulled into these meetings and there's not always a clear picture of why you are needed. Being able to, issue spotting essentially is what it is. Being able to recognize when you should ask a question and when there is a potential legal issue that no one else even knows is a legal issue, and addressing it. And as in-house counsel, it's not always legal issues either. A lot of it is, and this is something I think that has developed in the last couple years in my legal practice. It wasn't so much in the beginning, but as you start to expose yourself more to the healthcare business side, you're able to provide a little bit more business and risk mitigation advice to clients that doesn't necessarily entail practicing law. And the clients, I think, really find a lot of value in that. So I would say those are probably the biggest things. Being flexible, trying to keep your cool, especially when dealing with adverse parties. If there's litigation, some of my most tense moments as in-house counsel have been with on phone calls with outside counsel for plaintiffs or what have you, who are all worked up about something. And it's very easy to fall into that trap of getting worked up about it too. But I think keeping a cool, level head, at least when you're on those calls with third parties, maybe when you're on a call with your internal team, you can vent a little, but I think that goes a long way. And it can really position you as somebody that the team knows they can depend on and go to for both legal and non-legal advice.
Yeah, that's so true. Ramana, how do those compare to the skills you think young lawyers need in the law firm setting? Are they the same? Would you suggest some different skills?
No, I think I mean they're very similar skill sets because as you have internal clients in the in-house world, you're doing the same things with your external clients, but you're also thinking about the fact that your partners, especially as a junior and mid-level and senior associate, your partners are your clients as well. So you're using the same skills of making sure that you're being responsive, that you are talking to the partner in a way that they understand what you're saying, because they might not be used to hearing about a certain type of issue because you've spent the time in learning everything about it as the junior associate or mid-level associate. You've learned everything about a specific issue. And so it's important to be able to translate that to whomever you're talking to, which I think leads to one of the things I wanted to mention was, I think the biggest skill set that I would focus on is your communication ability and your ability to talk and write. I mean, I hate when I say that, but because I used to hate hearing it, but your communication is vital with anyone that you're dealing with, especially as a lawyer, health law or otherwise. So talking normally and talking with confidence is a key item that you definitely just should help develop yourself in doing. Writing, there are folks that aren't great at writing, but there are ways to get better, and it's all about making sure that you're willing to see where you're making errors yourself. I have an issue where I sometimes write the word all right with one L. And I just recently learned that it actually is two separate words. So you take those kind of little criticisms and you use that. And moving forward, I think that makes a huge difference to law firms and anyone pretty much, to understand what you're not good at and find ways to get better at it. In terms of other skill sets, it's kind of interesting because yes, as a health lawyer, you should know, the basics of certain different areas of health law. And you can get that from an intro to health law type class. Like everyone should know as a healthcare lawyer what it means to be in a self-referral situation or an anti-kickback situation. These are terms of art that we all learn as just junior lawyers to understand. But one of the things that we have to remember is, health law is not just regulatory and operations and transactions. It's litigation. There are healthcare issues in real estate again. There are various aspects of our practices that we kind of need to know what we don't know, and we need to know how to get the information that we do need to know in those situations. And I think it's really important for folks to understand how to get that information, distill it, and go forward with it. But really remember, and there could be litigation. I keep forgetting the fact that there's also litigation. There's healthcare lawyers that focus on white collar and other types of issues. And so there may be slightly different skill sets, but at the end of the day, we're all health lawyers. We all know somewhat of the basics, but communication is going to be key.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And it's interesting that you both went to really the soft skills, right? Not the hard skills, not the substantive knowledge, because anyone can learn that. If you put your mind to it, you can learn and get smart on any topic, but it's the communication of those points, just because it's up in your head doesn't do anyone else any good until you can communicate it succinctly. So I think that should also be of some solace to maybe law students out there who aren't in a health law program. That certainly doesn't mean that you can't take on a health law career. You may have to buck up on that substantive knowledge, but having those soft skills get you a long way. So let's talk also, and we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but let's talk about networking. Obviously, networking for both of you and even for myself was vital to getting our first jobs and for both of you and moving up to your current position. So I want to take a little time on this, especially right now in the world we live in. It's even more difficult than it might be regularly. So John, talk to me a little bit about finding and utilizing a mentor. What kind of suggestions do you have on that?
Yeah, so I don't think there's no right or wrong way to do it. And I think when it comes to networking, there's the formal networking and there's the informal networking. And I think both are equally as important. For finding and utilizing a mentor, for me, my biggest mentors have been attorneys within my legal team who've been practicing for 15, 20 years, who I have good rapport with. There will be some that you don't necessarily have that, and you can develop it, but there may be some that you won't be able to. So finding the ones that you do have, that you're able to establish that good open communication and honesty, and go have coffee with them or lunch or a beer and get to know them as a person. And I think that establishes that foundational level of trust and comfortability. And then those are the building blocks of any mentorship. Because then as you have things that come up in your career, you can ask them for their advice and tips. And I think there's different reasons why a lot of us need and want mentors. For myself personally, there are no lawyers in my family, so I don't have anyone that is a family member that I can go to and ask these questions that I may be uncomfortable asking my boss, as an example. So I've had to go into my professional world and develop those relationships where we have that level of trust. And I think that's important. And you can find that within your place of employment. You can find that in professional organizations that you're a part of. They can be healthcare specific, like the health law section, the health law committee, the ABA, there's a bunch of health law specific organizations that you can do that. But then there's also local bar associations, and like the Chattanooga Bar Association or the Tennessee Bar Association or the Colorado Hispanic Bar Association, or even meeting up with other lawyers that a friend may have a friend that's a lawyer. And these are all ways to network, but then also potentially find mentors that could be, a mentor doesn't have to be somebody that's been practicing 10 or 15 years longer than you. They can be your peer that has just had different experiences than you've had. I think, without having mentors, it makes it very, very difficult to grow, both professionally and personally in life and within the profession. So I would just suggest always being on the lookout for individuals within your network that could potentially serve as your mentor, and let them know. I think it's less of a burden and more flattering to individuals. You let them know, hey, I respect what you're doing and your opinion, and I'd like to be able to bounce ideas and questions off of you. And I think that's another way to establish that trust and level of comfortability with someone.
Right. And I think that's so true and rings true for me, because especially when I was in law school, I was like you, John, I didn't have any lawyers in my family. And I was so shy about reaching out and bothering people, right? I didn't want to be a bother to all these very busy attorneys. But, I never got turned down. I don't think a single time. Anytime I asked someone for coffee, or I asked them for a phone call, or asked them for some advice, I was never turned down. So especially for people who may be listening to this, who are shyer or introverted or feel uncomfortable, know that, I think from our perspective as young attorneys who have been out in the field for a few years, as well as older attorneys, they do welcome that and welcome the ability to give back to the profession in that way. So John, let's stick with you for a second. You talked about mentoring. Let's talk about networking more specifically. How do you suggest networking in healthcare? Do you think this industry is different or allows for different types of networking than others?
Probably, yeah. Especially as an attorney, I would say. As for the healthcare practice itself, it's probably very similar to a lot of other practice areas within the legal profession. I will say though, just kind of thinking back on the networking that I've done since I've been an attorney, I think in the first few years, as a law student and the first 2-3 years out of law school, a lot of the networking events that I attended were tied to the law school, the career development office. I spent a lot of time going back to the law school and speaking on panels, doing webinars, um, having mentees that were recent grads or law students. And over time, these people, these individuals, they may seem like, you're a lawyer and they're a few years behind you as a law student. So you maybe don't have as much in common, but give it a couple years and, we're all going to be on the same playing field and we're all going to be considered peers. And that's a good way, I think, in the beginning to develop that network of yours. And I talked a little bit about the formal networking and the informal networking. The informal networking is essentially just getting to know people in a friendly type manner. It's not necessarily starting off talking about the profession and the legal, your career growth and what you want to do. It's getting to know people, their family, where they're from, where they went to school, what they do for fun. And that's kind of how that informal networking works. And, that for me personally, that's where a lot of the help that I've gotten to grow professionally in advance has come from. It's come from the informal networking that I've done. And so that would be something that I would say is important. And it's probably, as a young lawyer, it's probably easier for some to do that because so many people at your law firm in the career development office, and so you can just tap into those resources that you're already familiar with. But I think it's very important to get involved in the local bar. These are the individuals that you're going to be seeing on a day-to-day and weekly basis. They're the ones that are going to be, sitting on the opposite side of a table in litigation, or if you're negotiating a contract, they're going to be the ones that the other party has hired to negotiate from their perspective. And it can make your professional work easier when you have that relationship and your familiarity with an attorney on the other side. So that's what I would say. And then, again, I think it's important as you develop your network to let people know what you're interested in. If you're considering a job change, or you want to be more on the compliance side versus the healthcare operations, or you want to be more on the litigation side, let your network know. And because we all come across, job opportunities, and if you can be someone that pops into their head right away, that's going to help you. And it all starts with just letting people know what you're interested in, and just trying to get as wide of a network as you can. And it doesn't have to be local; it can be all across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to follow up with that real quick, John, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about the fact that while you stayed in Colorado, I know for a little bit after you graduated law school, you ultimately moved across the country for your job. How did you establish a network in a new area?
It can be challenging for sure. I think it takes a little bit of creativity, and you definitely have to have the drive. But where I started, so I went from Colorado to Louisville, Kentucky, and then to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the local bar associations, at least in Chattanooga, have been key, absolutely key, to developing that network locally. I think another one, and I'm actually surprised that this hasn't been mentioned yet, but volunteering is another great way to develop your network. It may be just as important as everything else we've stated to this point, because another thing it does is it connects you with other lawyers that have the similar interests that you do. And that's another way to develop that trust and comfortability with someone. So that's how I did it. I went to a lot of legal clinics, and got involved in the local bar, and you roll the dice, so to speak, and go for the local leadership positions. And you may not get it, and that's fine, but it's a good way to get your name out there, to meet new people. And it may take a year or two for that to start happening, but eventually it will, and it's worth the time and effort you put into it.
Ramana, how do you think a young lawyer's networking strategy should shift now that we're kind of all virtual in the pandemic times versus how we used to operate back in the day before the pandemic?
Sure. So, I mean, I think what's shifted about it is I'm one of those folks that went to a lot of conferences as a law student, and through my young lawyer years so far, I would be highly active in the ABA health law section, attended AHLA conferences, and so you had that in-person discussions and in-person get to know type sessions. In fact, I believe John and I met at a health law section conference, and I always knew him as the guy that's an expert in clinical trials, and so I once had a question and reached out to John and said, "Hey, I know we only met one time. Did you mind helping me just kind of brainstorm what this issue is all about?" And as every other health lawyer is out there that I've met so far, he was more than gracious and absolutely assisted. And that's where now I'm going to shift to your real question of how do you do it in the COVID environment? Well, I think healthcare is one of those fields that brings in a group of people that really do care about one another. And so even though we're in a COVID environment today, people are willing to help. So I think the networking strategy and the shift that's happening right now is, using LinkedIn, using or going to the virtual conferences even and seeing who's on the list and having discussions by email after the fact, sending articles when you know of something of interest to someone else. That's another networking strategy. If you've talked to someone or had a phone call with them, send them something. If you think it's of relevance to them, they're going to be appreciative. You're going to be top of mind in general as that kind of thing happens. Some of the things that I've done is happy hours. Like, even though we're not seeing each other in person, we might get a group of people together that we haven't seen in a while and just, connect on a Zoom meeting or something of sorts and just see what's going on with everybody else. You can do that with your professional network going forward, but I totally hear you if as a law student, you're like, wait, I'm not going to go for a happy hour with other attorneys yet because I don't know how to act in them. I get it. But really, it's about being yourself. And if you're invited, take advantage of those kind of opportunities to get to know folks. If you see something that's out there as a virtual networking event, go jump on it, get involved, talk about yourself a little bit, get to hear what everybody else is doing. And you can still keep the doors open, but I get it. It's a much tougher job to do that now than it is when you can do it in person at a conference. And as everyone here knows on the panel, conferences are a great opportunity once we get out of this world of COVID where we're all stuck inside.
Yeah, for sure. And you kind of brought up the point. I think this is, I'm going to want to elaborate on a bit, but even for people who may not be comfortable in larger groups of people or at conferences, this is a perfect time right now to do those one-on-one sessions with people via Zoom. I've had a couple people reach out to me and they're 20, 30 minutes and it's perfect. And I think people may be more apt to do those because you don't have to get in the car. You don't have to drive to the coffee shop. It's a little bit less of a commitment in that sense. So you may find people more willing to do those, especially if you can, keep it brief and then keep in touch with them, like you said, Ramana, through emails or what have you. But yeah, I think that's a perfect way to do this whole networking strategy in the midst of COVID.
If I could, Jessica, just to add to that, I think another thing, my dad taught me growing up, and I think this rings true now, and it's a little bit in line with what you guys are saying, is check in on people, for no reason at all other than to just say, how are you doing? How's life going for you? I think that also goes a long way, because obviously when we have a question or we need something, we don't hesitate to reach out to the individuals that we think or know could help us. But I think it's equally important to reach out and check in on people when there's no need at all, other than just saying, hey. I think especially now in COVID, during COVID times, it's easier to do that because we're all sitting on our electronic devices all the time. So send that quick email, send a Zoom chat or a text. And, every now and then, if you haven't heard from somebody for a while at the beginning of the pandemic, I was trying to do that once a week where I was reaching out to somebody I hadn't talked to in a year or more, just checking in on them. I think that's another good way to maintain that network that you've developed over the years.
Absolutely, and I've got to jump in one more thing there as well. One of the things that I've noticed is it gets difficult over time of keeping in touch with folks that you've met in your past life. in your past world. I mean, remember, as an attorney, your referral base might come from anywhere. It could come from, truly prior to law school. So it's important to keep in touch with those folks that you met, ages ago. It's important to keep in touch with the folks that you met early in your career and onwards in law school. So it's important to just shoot out that email here and there. The other part is, once you create that mentor-mentee relationship with someone, don't forget to go back to your mentor or mentee. Specifically, especially the mentee to the mentor. I mean, I legitimately go back and seek advice, even if I'm just, thinking about it, and I probably could figure it out on my own. I make it a point to go talk to someone else about it, because you're going to get a different perspective. It keeps you, again, top of mind for that person as well, and makes the mentor feel more connected to their mentee. That's what I've at least noticed when I've helped law students and other young lawyers. If they come out and reach out to me, I will take, an extra 15, 20 minutes out of my day for sure, an hour even, to help them out. Here are 3 folks on this panel itself. One thing I urge people to do, sorry, I'm putting you all on the spot, LinkedIn us at the end of it, right? At the end of seeing the session, go on LinkedIn, press, link, and just tell us, hey, you joined this webinar. It's another easy strategy, and hopefully we can use our networks in the future to help one another out.
I think that's a phenomenal point, Ramana. And yeah, absolutely. Feel free to contact us. And, I feel like, even though we've become more digital and it's become easier to communicate with people over the years, that people do a worse job of it, right? So people don't keep up as well. How many times do you hear like, oh, I'm terrible at keeping up with people? So, it seems like a kind of an obvious point, but I think it's super helpful to stay in touch with people, because it is kind of abnormal anymore. So that can go a long way, and it takes 10 minutes to write an email. So it's not very much of an investment for, a lot of potential gain. So, but to both Ramana and John, I'll throw this to both of you. Going forward, in the event that this pandemic ever ends, I'm told it's gonna, how do you think networking will change? Do you think it will?
I mean, I think it has to, right? Because we've now have new technology to be able to use going forward. If we, Zoom, like who was using Zoom a year or 2 years ago at this point, it's something that's come about that's easier to use to keep in touch. But going forward, we're going to see us, going back to in-person dialogue and in-person meetings. And I do want to make the point that networking is not about making clients right away. Networking is the long game. It's about creating a true group of people that you feel comfortable enough to go to in the future, and talk and be friends with, in a sense, even colleagues, even if you don't work together day to day. You want to build that that capability to be that resource for folks. And I think we're going to be able to see that more of that post-COVID, because we have stymied a little bit in terms of COVID networking. But just as I reached out to John, he's going to be feeling free to reach out to me anytime he wants as well. And I mean, it's just a natural thing that the initial stage of networking is all about building your group of people that 10 years down the line, they might call you up and say, hey, I need some help. That's great, but the goal early on really should be about meeting people, understanding them, and getting to know them.
Yeah. Relationship building, absolutely. Go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the substance of networking will remain the same. What I envision, and maybe it's me being hopeful, but is because of what this pandemic has done, and it's forced us all kind of to stay in our homes. I think that when it's over, I think we're going to almost see like this renaissance of people being much more involved and active in things in person, locally and nationally. I think that whereas before people may have leaned in the direction of, well, I don't think I'll go to this thing, but I'll go to the next one. I think we've been locked in for so long without the option to participate in these events, that I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot more individuals who say, you know what, there could be another pandemic next month or next year. Hopefully not, but let me take advantage of the fact that I'm able to do things in person more. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I think people will find much more value possibly in in-person conferences and such. And I've heard a lot of people say that over the past year. But I just can't wait till we can get back to a conference together. It's just not the same otherwise. So yeah, John, I totally agree with you on that front. So I want to shift from networking a little bit and talk about maybe some other types of professional advancement, ways to better yourself early in your career. And Raman, I'll start with you. What do you think are some of the most valuable extracurriculars, if you will, that young lawyers can participate in?
So I was thinking about this question. I mean, clearly we're all going to say the ABA, AHLA, anything that has anything to do with healthcare is a great place to put some time in, volunteer, as John said, to be a leader in different things, or just get involved in some way, shape, or form, because you're going to get to meet a lot of other people. But one of the pieces of advice that I got that I love passing on here is, join a board, join a nonprofit board of directors or something of that sort. See what's out there that's nothing to do maybe with healthcare. Maybe it has something to do with healthcare, because you get a different perspective when you join different groups of people and you get to hear what they're thinking about, what they're worried about, and especially in the business environment. By joining a local board, in my case at least, I learned more about the finances of an organization, the employment law issues, the other kind of questions that the operations team had versus the other teams had. And it really opened up my world a little bit more to understand, it's not just about our niche areas of what we're working on. In order for a business to operate, they need a lot. There's a lot going on at any given time. So I think one of the most valuable things is joining a board, joining all of these different organizations. And remember, I mean, because we're healthcare, there are other organizations that are specific to different types of healthcare. So there are organizations that are specific to pharmaceutical industry. There are organizations specific to the hospital industry. There's organizations that are specific to each medical specialty. These are all great places to network and get to meet people, but also as an extracurricular activity to maybe write something for them or to speak on a webinar. Those are some of the things that I know I'm looking forward to doing.
Yeah, John, jump in. What do you think are some good extracurricular activities?
I think I would definitely underscore that getting involved in nonprofit boards, especially those that maybe don't necessarily touch on your practice or even being a lawyer, because having that exposure to different perspectives is going to benefit you in the long run. And of course, networking doesn't necessarily have to be with other lawyers. It can be with other community leaders or community members, physicians, other people that may have an interest in what you do, and you guys may mutually benefit from knowing each other and having that contact. But it also gives you this feel good kind of feeling of being able to help out in a way that you may not otherwise do. Because as you guys know, being a lawyer has a lot of real world benefits that don't necessarily translate into the practice of law. The way to analyze problems and problem solve, I think, goes a long way in a lot of these boards. And a lot of times you'll be the only lawyer on the board. And by the way, if you are, make sure that you do research on what you should and should not do as a lawyer in terms of practicing law on a nonprofit board. That can be a little tricky sometimes to navigate, but you can always bring benefit in the non-practicing aspect of serving on a board. Another one I will just mention, I think I mentioned earlier, is getting involved in your law school. If you can, if you're still in the area, with the Career Development Office, helping students that are currently in law school where you went because you were there, you were at that exact school, you had the same professors, you can help them navigate maybe difficult or challenging professors and other issues that they may be going through. And especially for young lawyers, I think it's important to do that because from my experience, at least when I was in law school, it was easier for me to open up and relate more to younger lawyers than maybe more seasoned attorneys. And so I would encourage that as well. And again, you're developing that network. They may not be an attorney now, but they will be in 2 or 3 years. So those would be the two, I think, important things that I've really appreciated.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And one thing I've seen, because we also have law student interns that come through our firm, is that the legal profession is a very small, pretty tight knit community, especially in health law. So there you will inevitably run across these individuals again. So keep that in mind when you're interacting with people, that this likely won't be the last time that you talk to them. So act accordingly and appreciate those relationships as such. So I know we've talked a lot about our first positions and how we get there, but I want to spend just a couple of minutes here and talk about that next step, how to kind of get to that next position. Either maybe it's a lateral move to another firm or another company, or just within your own firm or company. John, and I think this is kind of a unique question for in-house counsel. Talk to me about the different opportunities or maybe even limitations of professional advancement in the in-house counsel setting.
Yeah, I would say it probably varies by the organization. So maybe the first step would be, and I've done this in, I think, almost every job I've had, is having a frank conversation with your supervisor or your boss, letting them know what your short and long-term goals are and how the current place of employment that you're at fits into that. What opportunities for professional growth exist, what the timeline for that is, what the expectations are, and lining that up with what you want. I think that's important, because you're going to have some jobs where I've had in the past where there may be only one position that you can grow into, and the individual in that position, there's no intention that they're going to be vacating it for a long time. And so if you know that you're, in 2 to 3 years, you want to move into something else, and your current job maybe won't be able to necessarily give you that, that's something to be aware of, because you want to, I think you don't want to become stagnant in your career, and, be in a place where eventually you're like, okay, well, I wanted to make a move, but I didn't eventually because I didn't ask the right questions, or I didn't look at things from the bigger picture. And that's okay. I think it's important, and supervisors, I think, appreciate the honesty of what you're looking for. And if the current place of employment can't offer you that, a lot of times they're in your corner and they will help guide you to the right place that you want to be. So I would say that's the most important thing, is doing that assessment of what you want, and then an assessment of what your current place of employment can offer you, and whether that lines up. Another thing I would say that's very important is, this probably goes with any job, with any career, is make yourself an integral part of the team. Take on projects, volunteer for things, serve on internal leader, groups. And the con to that is we're all busy, and you're putting a little bit more on your plate. But I would caution people from taking on too much, because they say it's better to do one thing very well than to do a bunch of things not so well. And I think that definitely applies in taking on maybe too much in your professional employment context. But I think that's very important, because it shows that you have the initiative, and you have a lot of those skill sets and abilities that a lot of employers look for in choosing individuals to move up, so to speak, within the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Ramana, what do you have to add there? Because you've been in-house and now you're outside counsel. How do you see that?
I think I fully agree with what John said, especially in the in-house role. It's different because there's a set number of attorneys that might be within an in-house department, and so the leadership and ladders going up are kind of more stepwise there. Whereas, in at least my experience on the outside law firm standpoint, if you can make a business case, that doesn't mean you're bringing in clients, but if you can make a business case that you're good and they should keep you, and if you can make where your work product good, there's always an opportunity to either become partner, counsel, something going forward. And there's always other places to go and other things to do as well within the field. So, I don't see any real limitations from the outside counsel perspective. You can always go back in-house. You can always go into different fields in itself. But I think I think you want to have those discussions, even in the outside counsel perspective, with your superiors. Find out where they think you are in your planning and where you should be. One thing, and I'm not just saying this is truly something I do. I have a 2 or 3 year plan in my head at any given time of where I want to be in 2 or 3 years. A lot of people say 5 and 10 years. That's perfectly fine if that's your timing that you like to do. I have an idea of where I want to be in 10 years, but I really stick to that 2 to 3 year mark. And going back to another question that you had asked about how do you get that second job once you've gotten that first job? What do you do to get that second job? For me, it's been a lot of network related things, but I can tell you there are other resources out there. I looked at LinkedIn quite a bit when I was looking for that second or third job. I looked at different websites, different career groups for different pieces. I also went through recruiters in some instances as well. There's a lot of opportunities that you can, if you don't get the recruiters calling you every day, you can talk to one of your friends that is somewhere in a law firm. I'm sure they're getting hit with recruiters calling them about different opportunities. Talk to them and see if you can get something going there as well. But at the end of the day, some of the best positions that are out there are actually based on, people thinking, oh, wait, I would love to hire that person. Let me find out if there's a way for me to open up a position in this law firm or not, or in this area or not. And so just keeping yourself open to those possibilities, not necessarily asking for a job, but just, putting your feelers out and saying, hey, I'm interested. If you hear anything, let me know, kind of thing.
Right. And, you're your own best advocate for, moving up and moving on. So, you can't sit back and wait for someone to do that for you. You really have to show that initiative, I think.
Right.
If I could, one other thing, I think about a year ago, I forgot where I heard this, but I think another very helpful thing for me and that I think could be very helpful for many others. We all know the concept of a mentor and a mentee. Somebody, as a mentor, somebody who kind of helps you navigate through various situations, professionally, personally, someone that gives you advice. I think another very important thing that we should all strive to find is someone who will serve as a mentor, but also as an advocate for you. And because you just reminded me of that by saying we are our own biggest advocates, and it's true. But I think there's a lot of value in finding somebody who can serve as a mentor, but also can advocate for you in front of others when you're not in the room. That is going to go a very long way. Those are harder to find, but they're not impossible. And I shouldn't even say it's harder to find. I think it takes a little bit more communication and developing that trust and that rapport and that comfortability. But having an advocate, in your corner is going to go a long way for professional development, both outside of your current employment and within your, wherever your current employment is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys have hit the nail on the head. I think those are all phenomenal tips. And regrettably, we're getting close to our hour time here, but I want to throw it back to you, Ramana, and then to John, and give our audience any concluding thoughts. What have we not talked about today? What do you want to leave them with? What's kind of those last best words, Ramana?
Sure. So as a healthcare attorney, one of the things that I think we've discussed a couple of times today is everything can have a healthcare base in it. So if you are in a position where you're not doing healthcare law today, or you're not doing it tomorrow when you get your first job, focus on the things that are translatable. For me, I did an in-house stint at a chemical company, and some of the things that were translatable were some FDA experience, but also insurance, specifically casualty insurance. Who would think that casualty insurance would have a healthcare benefit? But we use insurance in every contract that I've ever written, is to understand that cyber liability, general liability, and professional liability. Having understanding of the pieces that you're working on and how it translates to the field you want to be in, I think is key. And you can make that point. You can show that emphasis of how important healthcare is to you when you're looking for that first, second, or third job.
Yeah, great points. John, what about you? Concluding thoughts?
My concluding thoughts, I think, I guess I'll start off by a quote that I found today that was very helpful to me. one of the greatest discoveries of all time is that a person can change his or her future by merely changing his or her attitude. And I think my closing thoughts would kind of be related to that. Don't let minor bumps and roadblocks in your career get you down longer than a few minutes or a day. Stay focused on what you want, try to remain positive, and focus on the things that you can control. It's unfortunate, but I think in a lot of professions like physicians and lawyers, you do come across a lot of people who are just, quite frankly, unhappy, or they're in a certain chapter in their professional lives where they're not feeling fully satisfied, and that's going to happen to all of us. But I think it's important to focus on how you can change your situation, and leaning on others, mentors, advocates, colleagues, friends, to get their advice on things you can do to achieve what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that I struggled with as maybe a law student or first couple years out. But, keep in mind that you have a long career ahead of you. What you do in your first year or two, even if you don't like it, even if it's not related to what you ultimately want to do, it's a building block for something, right? So take it for what it is, appreciate that, and know that it's temporary. You have a many decades worth of law practice ahead of you, regardless. So Ramana, John, thank you both so much. This has been really enlightening. I think it's been invigorating to kind of take a little bit of time and focus on ourselves and our career, and how we can better ourselves, which is something that is hard to take the time to do. And thank you for listening to this webinar. As Ramana suggested, please reach out to us on LinkedIn, ask questions, give advice. We're happy to help. That's why we're doing this. And look to the YLD Health Law Committee. We have our discussion board on Connect. Feel free to get on there and ask questions of the group. And that's another way that we can connect and network and help all of us move forward. So
Jessica, we also have the Zoom, sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if you want to plug the Zoom coffee sessions.
Absolutely. On the Connect page, you'll see a survey. We're doing Zoom coffee breaks right now, where we are pairing up young lawyers or law students with experienced attorneys for a 30-minute coffee break via Zoom. So, those mentoring, networking opportunities that Ramana and John were talking about, we're trying to set that up directly ourselves and give you a leg up. So get on Connect, fill out that survey, and we will work to get you connected with an experienced attorney to have that conversation. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thanks, guys.